There are many moments in Warhammer lore that truly chill me down to my very bones because it can be frightening what can happen to just regular humans. And there's one moment that really sticks out to me from Leviathan by Darius Hinks, which is just in the introduction sequence, where you see how an underworld crime boss has been targeted by the Tyranid hive mind, and so the shadow in the warp has made him crazy, and it's really frightening how he's acting and exactly what is going on. So I hope you all enjoy this short story, which will hopefully give you the heebie-jeebies and make it a little bit more difficult to get to sleep tonight. But that's just about it from me so far. Let's get into the storytelling. Our story takes place on the fortress world of Regium, a planet that belongs to the Imperium of Man, but it is now in the way of a Tyranid hive fleet that seeks to expand its tendrils through and dominate the planet and leave it as a lifeless husk. We follow a young girl, Beltis, as she struggles to try to keep order amidst all of the circling chaos. "Do your job," said Beltis, glaring at a mob in the alley. Her hand was resting on the electro flail at her hip, and her tone made it clear she was not prepared to debate the matter. But the mob were undaunted. They leered at her as though sharing a joke at her expense. For the first time in many years, she felt doubt. How could they look at her like that? How could they dare? The world had tilted on its axis. Had things really gone so wrong that low-life scum like this dared to defy her? "We'll go back to work when Gathus Culm himself tells us to," said the leader, a grey-skinned bile by the name of Tyrol. "We work for him, not you. Or, well," he smirked, "we used to work for him." Beltis's moment of doubt passed. These lowlives would be dead if it wasn't for Culm. He had raised them all from the gutter. He turned a mess of warring, backstabbing, petty criminals into an organization of genuine power. They were worthless without his leadership. Only Culm could have enabled them to achieve the things they had done. His vision, his hard work, that was the only reason they had anything. "You work for him," she said quietly, climbing down a fire escape and dropping into the alley. "Or you work for no one." She kept her tone neutral, letting them think this was going to be a reasonable conversation. Tyrol raised an eyebrow. "Is that meant to be a threat?" He raised his voice even higher now. "What if the enforcers learn Culm is the mastermind?" He looked at his friends. "It's a disgrace, isn't it, if you actually think about it? All those ammunitions made for the war effort, and Culm takes whole shipments, lining his own pockets. Terrible, really. Profiteering when our soldiers are so desperate for equipment, especially if you consider who we sell them to. Not all of those people have the Imperium's best interests at heart, do they?" Beltis was only a few feet from them now. "You think the enforcers don't know? You really think it's down to luck that they've never come knocking on this door? Use whatever passes for your brain. The enforcers work for him, just like everyone else in Port Jura." Tyrol was growing in confidence by the moment. He was swaggering now, garnering smirks from his friends. "You're living in the past, girl. That might have been true when Culm was in his prime, but not now. No one has seen him for months. He sauntered over to her and whispered theatrically, "Rumor is, he's dead, and you're just trying to pretend he's still alive because you know you're screwed without him." Beltis looked around at the group. "Did he just call me girl?" Some of the mob nodded instinctively, falling into old habits, forgetting that they were meant to be defying her. "What of it?" snapped Tyrrell, but his confidence wavered and he took a step back. "You're Culm's girl, Daddy's pride and joy, and you think that means you have the right to..." His words became a cough as Beltis lashed her flail around his throat, triggering the current. The smell of cooking meat filled the air. He dropped to his knees, grasping at the weapon, smoke pouring between his fingers. One of the others reached for something in his pocket, but then abandoned the idea as he saw that Beltis was pointing an auto pistol at his head. As Tyrrell burned, the mob backed away, spineless, as she'd expected. "Culm is alive," she said, keeping her voice low. She waved her pistol at the far end of the alley, where ground cars were rushing through the smog. Meanwhile, this place is going to hell, and the enforcers are doing nothing. Tyrrell pawed at her, making an odd, keening sound, his face turning purple. "We know about the explosions at the warehouse and those fools setting themselves on fire in Sapphire. Something's gone wrong, and who do you think will sort it out? Our great planetary governor over in Salamis? Or the Ultramarines? They don't care about normal people." She had only ever seen the Sons of Gulliman on grainy picked captures, but that had been enough to unnerve her. She shook her head. "No. Culm will sort this mess out, like Culm sorts everything out." She killed the flail's power and snatched it back from Tyrrell's neck. He fell to the ground, sobbing, clutching his ruined throat as smoke leaked from the wounds. "Get back to work." She pointed the flail at the mob, flinging blood and charred skin, "and take this puddle of piss back to his mother." They leapt to obey, their rebellion crumbling as quickly as it had emerged. But as they dragged Tyrrell away, muttering apologies, she wondered how long it would be before they tried again. This had never happened before, but she had a feeling it wouldn't be the last mutiny. Things were falling apart. She looked around at the windowless buildings lining the alley. She could hear gunfire in the distance and people screaming. Port Jura was losing its mind. She headed back inside, barking orders to menials as she headed up to her father's private chambers. She passed through gene-locked doors and paused at the top of the stairs, looking down the door-lined hallway, thinking of all the people who had visited her father here, come to pay fealty to the mighty Gathus Culm, the true ruler of Port Jura. The great and the good had flocked here over the years. Even the governors of Salamis had used to come and bend the knee. But that was before the world went mad. Before the High Lords of Terror took an interest in Regium, upsetting her father's carefully maintained balance of power, and installing new governors and stationing the Ultramarines down at Zarex. She wiped Tyrrell's blood from her flail as she approached her father's door. There was no need for him to know how bad things had become. He would be well soon, and then he would set things right, just like he always had. She tied a scarf around her face, opened the door, and entered his room, closing it quickly behind her. Insects swarmed around her, and her scarf did little to block out the stench. The room was lit by dozens of blood-red heat lamps, and the light revealed the carnage her father had wrought on his once beautiful belongings. Chairs and curtains lay scattered across the floor, torn and rotten, covered in mounds of cocoons and insect eggs. The air thrummed as moths and beetles flew back and forth, and the floor seethed with termites. The combination of movement and flickering red light was disorientating and made it hard for her to spot her father. Then she saw him, not far from where she was standing, sitting with his back against the wall. He was naked, but most of his tattooed bulk was covered by thick white dreadlocks that hung down from his head. He was grabbing constantly at the insects he had bred, cramming them in his mouth, chewing furiously and staring into the distance. "Father," she said, trying to speak calmly, as though there were nothing strange about his behavior. "You've got to get dressed and come with me. This has to stop. We've got to show them that you're still alive, still in charge." He continued eating as he looked up at her, spilling insects down his chest. "They think they can eat me," he crunched and swallowed, "but they're wrong." He shoved more insects into his mouth. "I eat them." She stared at him, battling the urge to howl in his face. Nothing she said was going to have any effect. Perhaps she could try medicating him. He looked as physically powerful as ever. It was only his mind that had failed. She could describe the problem to the Chirurgeon and swear him to secrecy, or pretend the medicine was for someone else. It seemed a reasonable plan, but deep down, she struggled to believe it would work. Her father's madness was part of something bigger. It was the madness of the city, the madness that had overtaken the whole of Port Jura. She wiped away some of the bugs and kissed his forehead. Then she gave him a flask of water and rose to leave. Before she could go, he grabbed her arm and looked at her with bright, lucid eyes. "Beltis, I will save us. If I keep them all in here, if I eat them all, they will never eat the city." He tightened his grip. "Do you understand?" She fought back tears. "I understand." He nodded and let go of her, slumping back against the wall and stuffing more insects into his mouth. She paused at the doorway and looked back at him. He was eating furiously, but there were so many insects crawling all over him that it looked like he was the meal. The sound of humming wings swelled in her head until it became so loud she could no longer bear it. She had the horrible feeling that her father's lunacy was somehow the truth, that the insects wanted to devour the city. "We have to get out," she whispered. Then she hurried from the room, locked the door, and ran from the building. So that, everyone, is one of the opening sections of Leviathan, and it does exactly what I think Darius Hinks wanted it to do. It has me with a small chill down my spine that makes me think that there's also a bug at the back of my neck as well. And yeah, I have to say, he does a great job of setting the scene before the Tyranids actually arrive and what regular humans go through, how much fear there is, and how everything just goes to shits. So if you do want to see more of this kind of content, readings from the lore and books, something that will help to give you a bit more of a storytelling perspective of Warhammer, then yeah, I'd love to share that with you guys. But please, tell me in the comments what you want to see. And other than that, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. That's just about it from me though. I've been Kiv, and I will see you all on the next one.